Average lifetime value is probably one of the most important metrics you should be tracking inside of your business. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to use a system and Stripe and connect the two so you can see the average lifetime value of all of your clients that you've ever had. Interesting, right? By the way, if you need any help automating, integrating, streamlining your business, check out the link below. We would love to help. Now, as you can see here, I am inside of my Monday.com system. This can be applied to any CRM system, just probably easiest to do it inside of Monday. So we have got my contacts record here. You could do it on an account level. It's entirely up to you. But let's say we just do it on contacts. Now, all of my contacts, I want to be able to see the total amount of money each contact has spent. And then I want to be able to get an average. And then I want to be able to see a report on that average. So I'm going to show you how to do all of that. And then we're also, in order to get the data in the transaction data from, let's say, Stripe into our system, we're going to have to integrate Stripe with Monday.com, and I'm going to be walking you through that in this video. Like I said, this does apply to any other CRM system. So say if you're using Salesforce or something else, this would work. And in addition to that, you don't necessarily need to use Stripe. You could do QuickBooks because you've got customer IDs and you've got transaction history, and when every invoice is raised for that particular account or contact, it can then push over. But for the sake of simplicity, and there's a lot going on, I'm just going to use Stripe and I'm just going to use Monday.com. So what we firstly need to go ahead and do is we need to go ahead and create a new board. Now, if you're using another CRM system, it's going to be a new object, and I'm going to call this transactions. So this is going to be a history board of all the transactions associated with a contact. So what we're going to do, we'll create this transactions board, and then we're going to connect the transactions board to the contacts board, and then we'll be able to track some data. So I'm going to have date being transaction date. And that's automatically going to pull across, which is super simple. So I'm just going to restrict the column editing on that. I don't necessarily need files. And then what I do need to do is I need to create a connection column. So again, if you're using another CRM system, you need to create a relationship, to the contacts board. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to create a two-way connection in Monday because it's important that we can see it from both sides. Go ahead and press connect boards. So I've got the contact associated with the transaction. And then what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and add the transaction value as well. So that's just going to be a simple numbers column, and it's going to be value. There are a couple of other things that we're going to need to take into consideration. This is going to be pertinent with both Stripe, QuickBooks, Xero, you name it, we will need this information. I'm sorry, I'm just deleting some of the excess rubbish we do not necessarily need. So we've got value. I am in the United Kingdom, Londres, so I'm going to go ahead and set that as the pound sign. Of course, if you're in the United States of America or anywhere else in the world, set the representative currency. So now if I go ahead and put £10 in, I can see the value associated with this transaction. Now, two things I'm going to want to add is I'm going to want to add a customer ID. So that's just going to be a text column. This is going to pull through from wherever we're integrating. So customer ID, and then I'll probably also add a transaction ID as well. So I'm going to go and add another column to the right, text column, and then we'll add a transaction ID. So these are pretty much, and I can guarantee I'll be forgetting something. This is more or less everything that we need. So transaction date is going to automatically populate, and then I'll just delete these for the sake of keeping things clean. Customer ID will pull in from Stripe. Transaction ID. So customer ID is the person. Transaction ID is more like invoice ID or payment ID. What I might call this is payment ID, because if you're doing this with QBO, it's going to be invoice ID. If you're doing it with Stripe, it's probably going to be payment or transaction ID. So it doesn't matter it's kind of like an arbitrary naming convention just to make things clear. But the customer ID is really important. What that does mean though is we're going to need to have a customer ID column or field on the actual contacts board as well. Because what we're going to do is we're going to run a script or a mechanism of some description that when a new transaction is created on the transactions board where the customer ID matches the customer ID on the contacts board, then we automatically want them to connect, right? So we can do that inside of Monday.com, and it's pretty easy to do, but we just need to make sure that if the customer ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, although highly improbable it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that they both connect, right? So they have to match. Otherwise, you'll be sending transactions into the transactions board without ever connecting it to the contacts board. So Just take that into consideration. Now, how you go about getting the customer ID, totally different conversation. Again, like this is quite complicated. This is top level stuff. No, it's not that complicated. If I can do it, it can't be that hard. But it is a little harder. So you would need to think about that when you're doing the initial creating of a customer, whether that be in QBO or Stripe, because if you're not familiar in Stripe and QuickBooks, you've got customers, and then within customers you have transactions. Okay, so when you create a new contact record or customer record inside of QBO, QuickBooks, or Xero, the same applies to Xero as well. You then have transactions or invoices relating to that customer. You cannot independently create an invoice inside of QuickBooks, nor can you do the same in Stripe, nor in Xero. So there is a relationship there. So we're almost emulating that relationship in order to track the data. Now, some additional information that we're going to want to pull across is, obviously, we now have our link to transactions because it was a two-way, so it's a two-way connection. So I'm just going to call this transactions, bloody hellfire, transactions. I'll restrict column editing, but what I want to do and what's really important for me is mirroring this information over. So I'm going to mirror the information, connect the column to the transactions board, and then obviously I want the value, and then I want the sum for all. So contact value. So this is exactly how much this contact has spent. And then what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to get an average, which is pretty cool, if you ask me. So let's go ahead and now head over to my favorite tool, Zapier. Now, if you're not familiar with Zapier, full tutorial linked above. Go and check that out. It's literally the means of connecting to or any system inside of your business to one another. So it's like a third-party integration tool. It's like think of it as like a translator, English to Spanish, but one system to the next. Okay, so I'm going to create a new Zap. I'm in my system. Go ahead and press create Zap, and then what I want to do is every time there's a trigger being payment. Okay, so Stripe. Stripe is, I'm just going to use, like I said, Stripe for the sake of this video. Actually, I could use QuickBooks. Nah, stick with Stripe. No, let's stick with Stripe. Maybe we'll do both. When there is a new payment. So people get confused between new customer, new charge, new event, new invoice, new payment. The one that you're looking for is new payment. Trigger when a new payment is completed, because I don't know if you've ever noticed with Stripe especially, you often get a new customer's been created, but sometimes a payment doesn't go through, whether the card bounces, stuff like that. So, you know, that's there is a key distinction between new customer and new payment. And then new charge is, again, something else. So when a new payment is made, we're going to go ahead and press continue, and then I'm just going to test this trigger, right? So I'm just going to look for information. So test trigger again, because it's Thursday morning and things can be quite slow. So now I have got a new payment that's been pulled through. So you can see here, I've got a customer ID. Now this customer ID is exactly what we're looking for. And I've also got a payment intent or payment ID, right? So those are the two things that we need. Customer ID, payment ID. Super simple. And then obviously we need the amount. So the amount is where we're going to distribute the value. We don't necessarily need anything else. So for the sake of this video, just to keep things clear, now this is actual live data. You won't be able to see all of this information. I'm just going to copy this customer ID. I'm going to go to my contacts board and I'm going to pretend that this is my customer ID. Okay. So it's not, but it is today, right? So I'm going to go ahead and then I'm going to go ahead and press continue. And then my action is monday.com. So I'm going to create an action inside of monday.com. Again, Zapier is really on the slow side today. What is going on? It is slow every morning. I don't know why. So now I've selected monday.com. We need to create action event, which is create item in a board. So then I'm going to select my account. Again, if you're not used to all of this, check out the video linked above. Create item, go ahead and press continue. And then the board ID in this instance is going to be transactions, not contacts, transactions. And then the item name can literally be whatever you want. So I'm just going to call this example name for the sake of this video. Or I might call it Nick Boardman. There we go. And then I would do, let's say, the transaction date as well, or created formatted. There we go. So it's going to push over my name and then the transaction information. So when the transaction happened. And then all I need to do is map the customer ID, the payment ID, the value, and the transaction date to, because there's very few fields. So let's just start with customer ID. So I'm just literally going to search. It's called customer ID. And then that is my customer ID. And then it's payment ID. I think it was like PI something. Again, payment ID might actually not even be necessary, but there you go. I've got the ID there. Then I've got the value. So 1680, I believe, was the value. So I'm going to go ahead and search for that. And that was the amount. And then contact I don't need, because that's going to trigger when the customer ID is populated when an item created. So I'll walk you through that setup in a moment. And then I've got transaction ID as well. So that's just going to be created format. So now all I'm going to go ahead and do is press create, and I'm going to test this step. And then I'm going to head over to my contacts board, and what should magically happen in a moment's time on the transactions board, naturally, is this will pull through. Now you can see we have got a few issues, like I've mapped the date to a text column, which means that the formatting's weird, but as you can see on the transaction date, it hasn't. So what I might do is just go back, reconfigure this, delete that because I don't need it. Go ahead and press continue, might test this step again. And then that should pull through without the weird thing in my bob, and then I can go ahead and delete that. So now I've got customer ID, payment ID, value, and the transaction date, which is pretty cool, right? Now, all I need to do is go to automate in the top right-hand corner, and then I need to go to templates, item creation. And then what we're searching for is when an item is created in this board, connect the item where this column matches this column in another board, right? Connect. So this column is going to be customer ID, where in another board is going to be contacts. This column is... have I got the right contacts, this column? Evidently not. Contacts. I think it's this one. There we go. Sorry, I've got so many. There you go. Customer ID, then connect, and then that's the connection column that we created earlier in this video. So that's create. And now you can see that every time a new item is created where the customer ID matches the customer ID on the contacts board, they're going to marry up. So they're going to auto connect. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to delete these two, and I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go and retest my Zap again. So you can see here that's just worked, and then magic will happen, and then that has automatically appeared, which means if I go to my contacts board now, I'll be able to see the contact value, which is awesome, right? However, if I then go ahead and retest this step again, that's going to create two transactions. So now I've got 1680, which... pardon me on the maths, but it's about 3,120 quid, I think. But I might be wildly wrong there. I don't know. I was far off. Right, so now I've got a contact value of 3,360 because there are two transactions associated with one contact. Now imagine all of your contacts had this information and this was working constantly. How cool that would be. Pretty awesome, right? Now, the next step of this process, because we've got everything else set up, is obviously to publish this Zap, so to make sure that it's on and it's working. But then we need to report on this information. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a report so I can see what my average is. So I'm just going to press plus at the top. I'm going to add a blank view. Again, you can kind of create a new dashboard if you want. You can do this however you want. And I'm just going to get a numbers column, 3-dotted button, settings, and then I just want contact value. I don't know why we've got that twice. Contact value. Maybe I've got one here mirroring over from the deals board, which I do, which I can get rid of because I don't need that because that doesn't exist anymore. So if I go to my blank 3-dotted button, settings, select contact value, but the important part is we customize this, put a pound sign, make it manual, remove one of the zeros, and then get an average. That's the important part. And let me show you why. So now we've got an average. It doesn't matter where you've got where. So this is average customer lifetime value tracked. Literally one of the most important metrics inside of your entire business is now readily available for you to see in your monday.com system or any other system. If you're using another system, this might be slightly more confusing to keep track of, but the principle still applies. So now if I've got another contact, and let's go ahead and add another one. So I'm going to call this not Nick Boardman for the sake of humor. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another transaction called not Nick Boardman. And then within this, there's going to be a value of £500. Okay. Then I'm going to associate this with not Nick Boardman. That will then give me, and I know obviously this isn't proper because we've not got the Stripe connection and I'm making this up as I go along. But now if I go to blank, you will see here we've got 500 and 3,360, but my average customer value is £1,930. So that means, right, this is the exciting part. If I spend £1,000 to acquire a client, my average value is £1,930. That means my gross margin is £930. That's not good. That's not healthy. I don't think so anyway. But if I were to change the value on the transaction to, let's say this one was £6,000 on a transaction, and then I will head over to my contacts board again and then go to blank, you can see that that hasn't updated for some reason. Give it a minute. There you go, 6,000. So I'm just going to hit refresh on this board here. Might take a moment to update, go back to blank. And you can see my average customer lifetime value is 4,680. Massive improvement. Again, I know I'm just putting numbers in. If only making money was that easy, right? But you get the idea. So now if I spend £1,000, I know I'm going to get 4,680 average customer lifetime value. The more data you have across all of your clients, the better. But this is one of the most valuable data points that you can track in your business. Now, I'm just going to go back to my Zap a second. This is what happens with Stripe. I have mentioned that this can be done with QuickBooks. So I've linked a video above where you can find out how to kind of get around connecting QuickBooks to Monday.com, or the same principle applies for any CRM system again. But you can emulate what I've created there, plus with this video, to get the average customer lifetime value if you're working solely off QuickBooks as opposed to Stripe. If you need any help automating, integrating, streamlining your business, we would love to help. Getting data like this or literally anything else. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.